Many people have already stopped listening or reading by this point, sure of their preconceived notions and unwilling to risk having them exposed. Calling Trump a fascist may seem like a convenient shorthand description, but it masks the depth of the real movement behind Trump. The truth is difficult but important to understand. The label fascist, like the label socialist, is thrown around as an easy epithet to make it sound like something has been said that is profoundly insightful and meaningful. That's why Trump uses both labels interchangeably and often together, to pretend he's profound when he's actually clueless. Don't be like Trump. Don't be so superficial. Trump isn't a fascist, and if you give me a few minutes of your time, I will explain why that is, and then you'll have a better way of countering the malevolent corruption that is behind Trump's movement. If you want to stop the movement behind Trump, you need to deal with what he is, and not waste time and effort arguing over whether he is a fascist. He's not, and that's important. It's worse than that. I agree with the historian Jonathan Zatlin, who says that critics of Trump bandy about the term fascist facilely and without historical reference. Fascism was a historical phenomenon of interwar Europe, Zatlin says, and you can't call Trump Republicans fascists. Zatlin says that we need to understand Trump and his followers in the context of a particular strand of American politics that dates back to the country's founding. That's the key to understanding Trump. He is distinctly American. He is a symptom of American nationalism. Calling Trump a fascist diverts attention from the realities of the movement that takes Trump as its current figurehead and the history behind that movement. Hitler was a fascist. Mussolini was a fascist. Their despicable 1930s political ideology was a product of its time and place. It was an irrational reaction to economic depression and cultural alienation in post-World War I Europe. That doesn't even remotely excuse Hitler or Mussolini for their heinous and unforgivable actions. It only explains why they succeeded in grabbing power and how they could have been defeated before they launched a horrific war. We can't defeat the American MAGA movement the way the world defeated Hitler's Nazi movement. MAGA isn't fascism. It's American nationalism, which resembles fascism but has key differences. Comparing Trump to Hitler isn't entirely nonsensical because, like Hitler, Trump is a right-winger who has sought to consolidate power in himself. But beyond that, the comparison is less accurate. Not all forms of authoritarianism are fascist. That Trump is an authoritarian does not mean he is Hitler. Hitler was able to grab power because he exploited the widespread anxiety of a country in crisis. Germany in the 1930s was suffering from the worldwide economic depression, made worse in Germany by the punitive measures implemented by the post-World War I Treaty of Versailles. Hitler was able to position himself successfully against the real threat of Russian-sponsored Bolshevik revolution, offering a nativist alternative to foreign influence. Like Mussolini, Hitler played off fears of foreign influences over a weak nation to sell a political agenda that asserted a vengeful, expansionist militarism against foreign adversaries. Mussolini's Italy lacked the military power to enact this agenda, but Hitler's Germany had the industrial base and military experience to prosecute wars of vengeance and conquest. Trump rose to power in an entirely different circumstance, with an entirely different agenda. When Trump ran for president in 2016, the U.S., unlike Hitler's Germany, was a world power at the height of its economic prosperity. Throughout Trump's 3 runs for the presidency, the U.S. faced no real foreign threat to its home territory, only a threat of a lessening of its hegemonic business interests. Whereas Hitler united corporate interests under the cause of German expansionism, Trump has sought to unite the resentful elements of the lower classes against an imagined enemy within. These distinctions are no mere semantics. Fascism was a right-wing movement to forge a strong national identity to overcome foreign adversaries, a movement marked by vengeance against an external threat, even though Hitler's solution to that threat was childishly absurd and ultimately self-destructive. Trump's MAGA movement was and is a set of petty grievances against diversity and inclusion. Fascism says a whole nation needs to surrender all freedoms to facilitate wars of foreign aggression. Trump says the American nation needs to deprive only a segment of the population of freedom to enhance the power of the rest, in particular, extending the power of corporate capitalism. Hitler wanted his armies to roll across the world, creating more room for Germans. Trump wants to wall off America from the rest of the world, with the exception of American businessmen exploiting foreign labor and resources. Hitler, within weeks of gaining power, began building prison camps to intern political prisoners and those deemed undesirables, mostly Jewish people. Trump attempted to ban Muslims and pretended to build a border wall, but as in all things, he's more talk than action. And mostly, Trump simply continued America's long history of hostility toward immigrants and suppression of minorities. Hitler fixated on German strength to overcome its weakness, while Trump fixates on American victimhood to reassert its superiority. That difference between fixation reflects a key difference between fascism and American nationalism. Friedrich Nietzsche developed the concept of ressentiment, a feeling of fear and loathing of other people caused by feelings of impotence. In Nietzsche's conception, ressentiment motivates slave morality, the contemptuous reaction of weak people to strong and noble people. It's a desire to tear down the strong and replace them. That describes Hitler's fascist movement and its call for support from people, utterly reprehensible and disgusting. American nationalism is different. It is what Jason A. Springs refers to as zombie nationalism. Springs describes it as the exclusionary patterns of racism, ethnocentrism, heteronormativity, and patriarchy that fuels the engine of ressentiment. American nationalism despises and seeks to further disempower the already marginalized, women, non-heteronormative people, people who are not perceived as sufficiently white, and others. That describes the MAGA movement and its call for support. It is the desire of those who perceive themselves as already strong and noble, seeking to further suppress those they perceive as weak and inferior. Both Hitler and Trump are pathetic and delusional. Both are far-right authoritarians, but their movements have different motivations and goals. Hitler was of the lower class. Trump is of the upper class. Hitler sold the lie that his struggle against the elites was the struggle of the downtrodden German people. Trump sells the lie that he is the elite, that he's a successful businessman who personifies American strength. Trump's rhetoric, his lies, evokes the reactionary tribalism of American nationalism, the myth of American exceptionalism. It's the zombie nationalist myth that America has a divine mandate to maintain a right-wing, white, evangelical nation superior to all other nations. That's why America has always been hostile to immigrants, has always practiced systemic discrimination against minorities, and has always worshipped wealth. Trump isn't Hitler. Trump is all American. If Trump disappeared, little would change, because Trump is a symptom of America. Until we stop throwing around rhetorical labels and start dealing with how to live up to the promise of an America that truly offers liberty and justice for all, we will remain on this treadmill and create more MAGA movements.